The Case of the Vanishing Ventriloquists. A Raven Darkblade Mystery. Chapter 2. The orchestra plays on until it doesn't. Detective Raven Darkblade, currently standing at 5 feet 10 inches, because confidence was a finite resource and he'd use most of his at the bank, arrived at the Crimson City Orchestra Hall at precisely 2:47 p.m., according to his watch, which he'd forgotten to set for daylight savings 3 years ago. The building loomed before him like classical music made architectural, intimidating, probably expensive, and making him feel underdressed. His trench coat, which had seemed perfectly professional at the bank, now felt like wearing sweatpants to the opera. Another dummy murder, he said to himself, because talking to yourself was only crazy if someone heard you. And Officer Jenny Shoutsloud was still back at the bank, trying to figure out how to put crime scene tape around the puppets. The Crimson City Orchestra Hall's lobby was all red velvet and gold trim, like a vampire's living room if vampires had good taste and corporate sponsors. A crowd of musicians in formal black attire stood around looking professionally distraught, which is like regular distraught, but with better posture. Detective Darkblade! A woman rushed toward him, her conductor's baton still clutched in her hand, like a very thin weapon. I'm Melody Orchestrason, assistant conductor and witness to the most bizarre crime in musical history. Tell me what happened, Raven said, pulling out his notepad, which was now a Chinese takeout menu because he'd left the crossword puzzle book at the bank. It was during our morning rehearsal, Melody began, her voice trembling like a violin string that had seen better days. We were preparing for tonight's performance of Beethoven's Greatest Hits, Volume 2, The Revenge. Professor Wisewood appeared on the conductor's podium at exactly 10 a.m., or maybe 10:15. Time signatures are different in classical music. Professor Wisewood is another ventriloquist dummy? Raven asked, already knowing the answer but needing to fill conversation. Yes. He belongs to Winston Wisecracks, our Friday night entertainment coordinator. But Winston hasn't been seen since Tuesday's wine and cheese reception. The cheese was brie, very suspicious cheese. Raven made a note. Suspicious cheese? Then crossed it out. Then wrote it again. Detective work was hard. And the dummy was conducting. Raven's height grew to 6 feet 0 inches with incredulity. Not just conducting brilliantly. Melody's eyes went wide with the memory. His little wooden arms moved with perfect precision. The orchestra followed his lead like he was Bernstein himself. If Bernstein was made of wood and had a painted-on tuxedo. She led him into the main concert hall, where the orchestra sat in their positions, looking like they'd witnessed a miracle and weren't happy about it. On the conductor's podium lay Professor Wisewood, face down with a tiny, ornate knife protruding from between his wooden shoulder blades. The knife couldn't have been longer than a letter opener, but it was definitely real, definitely sharp, and definitely not supposed to be there. We played all of Beethoven's Fifth, said Timothy Kellerman, the lead cellist, whose name was too convenient to be real, but apparently was. Every note, Professor Wisewood's conducting was transcendent. I've never played with such passion. Which is disturbing because I was being led by a dummy. Then what happened? Raven asked, scribbling notes that looked more like a grocery list. At the final crescendo, Melody continued, just as we hit that last triumphant note, bam! The knife appeared in his back. He spun around 3 times, took a bow, and collapsed. It was the most dramatic death scene since our production of Opera Deaths, the musical. Did anyone see who threw the knife? Raven asked hopefully. Threw it? Melody looked confused. Detective, nobody threw anything. The knife just appeared. One moment his back was normal wooden back. The next moment, knife. Knives don't just appear, Raven said with the confidence of someone who'd never investigated supernatural puppet crimes before. Neither do conducting dummies, the entire orchestra said in unison, which was impressive without a conductor. Raven examined the crime scene with the thoroughness of someone who'd definitely seen crime scenes on TV. Professor Wisewood wore a painted tuxedo that was somehow more formal than the real tuxedos around him. His wooden face bore an expression of scholarly disappointment, like he'd just read a student's paper on why Beethoven was just okay. I have a theory, Raven announced, his height reaching a confident 6 feet 2 inches. The dummies are possessed. They're seeking revenge against their ventriloquist masters for years of having hands shoved up their... That's ridiculous, interrupted Dr. Harrison Knows Music, the orchestra's resident expert on everything and pain in everyone's neck. There must be a logical explanation. Hidden strings, magnets, very small people inside the dummies. Have you checked inside the dummies? Raven asked. That would be disturbing evidence tampering. Dr. Knows Music sniffed. Good point, Raven agreed, not wanting to admit he hadn't thought of that. A security guard waddled over, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, which was the natural state of security guards everywhere. His name tag read, Bob Watches Nothing. Detective, I should probably mention, Bob wheezed, clearly unaccustomed to mentioning things. I saw someone suspicious last night, during my 3 a.m. rounds. Or was it 3 p.m.? I work a lot of shifts. Suspicious how? Raven leaned forward eagerly. They were carrying what looked like a ventriloquist dummy. But get this. The dummy was carrying a smaller dummy, which was carrying an even smaller dummy, which was carrying a tiny dummy, which was carrying something I needed a magnifying glass to see. But I think it was another dummy. It was like those Russian nesting dolls, but they were all outside each other and walking. How many dummies total? Raven asked, his detective brain trying to process recursive puppetry. I counted 7 before my mind couldn't handle it. The last one was so small it might have been a thumbnail with a face drawn on it. They were all walking in perfect synchronization, like the world's most disturbing conga line. Did you stop them? Stop them? I hid in the janitor's closet and questioned everything I thought I knew about reality. I don't get paid enough to confront infinite recursive puppets. Raven's mind raced like a sloth on sedatives. 2 ventriloquist dummies murdered. 2 ventriloquists missing. Both dummies seen performing their master's acts before dying dramatically. The pattern was clear as mud. Tell me, he said to Melody, did Professor Wisewood say anything before the, knife situation? Melody thought hard, which looked painful. Actually, yes. Right before the final note, I could swear I heard him whisper something. It sounded like the show must go on, but the silence comes for all. Then he cackled. Do you know how unsettling it is to hear a dummy cackle while conducting Beethoven? I'm beginning to, Raven muttered. Should we cancel tonight's performance? Timothy Shallowman asked nervously. What if more dummies show up? The show must go on, Melody declared dramatically. That's what Professor Wisewood would have wanted, if he'd been real and capable of wanting things. Raven stared at the miniature crime scene. A tiny knife, a dramatic death, an impossible murder witnessed by 47 musicians, or was it 74? The second violins kept multiplying. His theory about possessed puppets was sounding less crazy by the minute, which worried him because his theories were usually wrong. I need a list of every ventriloquist in the city, he announced for the second time today, having forgotten he'd already asked for one. And someone should check on Winston Wisecracks. He's either in danger or he's a very dedicated method actor. There's a ventriloquist convention this weekend, Dr. Knows Music offered reluctantly. At the Crimson Convention Center, hundreds of ventriloquists from around the world. The theme is finding your voice in silence. That's either very convenient or very ominous, Raven observed. Both, everyone agreed. As they stood there, surrounded by musicians who'd just been conducted by a corpse puppet, Raven noticed something odd. Professor Wisewood's painted monocle had slipped during his death scene, revealing something underneath. Is that? Raven squinted, his vision suddenly 20/20 when the plot demanded it. A tiny camera? Oh, those, Melody said casually. All the performance dummies have them. Winston liked to record his shows for his YouTube channel. Wisecracks with Wisewood. 12 subscribers. Very niche content. So there might be footage of the murder? Raven asked excitedly. I suppose so, Melody shrugged. But who would think to check that? Not Raven, apparently. He made a mental note to remember this conversation never. Secure the scene, he commanded, already backing toward the exit. Nobody touches the dummy, or the knife, or the suspicious cheese from Tuesday. What about the performance tonight? Timothy called after him. Perform, Raven shouted back. But maybe skip any pieces that involve death, revenge, or puppets. That eliminates most of opera, someone muttered. As Raven left the orchestra hall, his mind whirled with possibilities. 2 dummies dead, 2 ventriloquists missing, a convention coming up, and somewhere in Crimson City, which looked distinctly chartreuse in the afternoon, light. A 3rd dummy was probably planning its own dramatic finale. He needed to find that dummy before it found its ventriloquist, or before it found him. But first, lunch. Detecting was hungry work, and that Chinese takeout menu had looked particularly compelling. To be continued dramatically and musically. Author's note: this chapter is dedicated to all the orchestras who've never been conducted by possessed puppets, which is hopefully all of them. Also to Beethoven, who would probably have opinions about this. Any resemblance to actual puppet-conducted symphonies is purely coincidental and should be reported to authorities immediately.